Harry Potter Chapter 17 The Heir of Slytherin. He was standing at the end of a very long, dimly lit chamber. Towering stone pillars, entwined with more curved serpents, rose to support the ceiling, lost in darkness, casting long black shadows through the odd, greenish gloom that filled the place. His heart beating very fast. Harry stood listening to the chill silence. Could the basilisk be lurking in a shadowy corner behind a pillar? And where was Ginny? He pulled out his wand and moved forward between the serpentine columns. Every careful footsteps echoed loudly of the shadow hosts. He kept his eye narrow, ready to clamp them shut at the smallest sign of movement. The hollow eye sockets of a jaw of the stomach he thought he saw once there. Then, as he drew level with the last pair of the pillars, a statue high as the chamber itself loomed into view, standing against the back wall. Harry had to crane his neck to look up into the gigantic face above. It was ancient and monkish, with a long, thin beard that fell almost to the bottom of the wizard weeping stone robes, where two enormous gray feet stood on the smooth chamber floor, and between the feet, face down, lay a small black-robed figure with flaming red hair. "Ginny!" Harry muttered, sprinting to her and dropping to his knees. "Ginny, don't be that! Please don't be that!" He flung his wand aside, grabbed Ginny's shoulders, and turned her over. Her face was white as marble and as cold, yet her eyes were closed, so she wasn't petrified. But then she must be... "Ginny, please wake up!" Harry muttered desperately, shaking her. Ginny's head lowered hopelessly from side to side. "She won't wake," said a soft voice. Harry jumped and spun around on his knees. A tall, black-haired boy was leaning against the nearest pillar, watching. He was strangely blurred around the edges, as though Harry were looking at him through a misty wind. But there was no mistaking him. Tom Riddle. Riddle nodded, not taking his eyes off Harry's face. "What do you mean, she won't wake?" Harry said desperately. She's not alive. She's still alive," said Riddle, "but only just." Harry stared at him. Tom Riddle had been at over 50 years ago, yet here he stood, a weird misty light shining around about him, not a day older than 16. "Are you a ghost?" Harry said uncertainly. "A memory," said Riddle quietly, "preserved in a diary for 50 years. He pointed toward the floor, near the statue's giant toes. Lying open there was a little black diary Harry had found in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. For a second, Harry wondered how it had got there, but there were more pressing matters to deal with. "You've got to help me, Tom," Harry said, raising Ginny's head again. "We've got to get her out of here. There's a basilisk. I don't know where it is, but it could be along any moment. Please help me." Riddle didn't move. Harry, sweating, managed to hoist Ginny half of the floor and then to pick up his wand again, but his wand had gone. Did you see? He looked up. Riddle was still watching him, twirling Harry's wand between his long fingers. Thanks, said Harry, stretching out his hand for it. A smile curled the corners of Riddle's mouth. He continued to stare at Harry, twirling the wand idly. Listen, said Harry urgently, his head sagging with Ginny's dead weight. We've got to go. If the basilisk comes, it won't come until it's cold, said Riddle calmly. Harry lured Ginny back onto the floor, unable to hold her up any longer. What do you mean? He said. Look, give me my wand. I might need it. Riddle smiled broadened. You won't be needing it, he said. What do you mean, I don't be? I've waited a long time for this, Harry Potter, said Riddle. For the chance to see you, to speak to you, said Harry, losing patience. Look, I don't think you get it. We're in the chamber of secrets. We can talk later. We're going to talk now, said Riddle, still smiling boldly, and he pocketed Harry's wand. Harry stared at him. There was something very funny going on here. How did Ginny get like this? He asked slowly. Well, that's an interesting question, said Riddle pleasantly, and quite a long story. I suppose the real reason Ginny Weasley like this is because she opened her heart and spilled all her secrets to an invisible stranger. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Said Harry. The diary, said Riddle. My diary. Little Ginny's been writing in it for months and months, telling me all her pitiful worries and woes, how her brother treats her, and how second time around when both Riddle's eyes splintered. How she didn't think famous, good, great Harry Potter would ever like her. All the time he spoke, Riddle's eye never left Harry's face. There was an almost hungry look in them. It's very boring. Listen to the silly bubbles of the time, but I was patient. I wrote that. I was sympathetic. I was no one ever understood like you, Tom. I'm so glad I put this diary to confide in. It's like having a friend I can tell you running in the pocket. We laughed at high, we laughed at innocence. It made the hair stand up. It made the hair stand up. And on the back of Harry's neck. If I say it myself, Harry, I've always been able to charm the people I met. So Ginny poured out her soul to me, and her soul happened to be exactly what I wanted. I grew stronger and stronger on a diet of her deepest fear, her darkest secrets. I grew powerful, far more powerful than little Miss Weasley, powerful enough to start fitting Miss Weasley a few of my secrets, to start pouring a little of my soul back into her. What do you mean? Said Harry, whose mouth has gone very dry. Haven't you guessed yet, Harry Potter? Ginny Weasley opened the Chamber of Secrets. She strangled the school roosters and dropped threatening message on it was. She sat the serpent of Slytherin on poor Mudblood and the Swede cats. No, Harry whispered. Yes, really calmly, of course. She didn't know what she was doing at first. I was very amusing. I wish you could have seen her new diary and charts. Far more interesting. They became dear excited, watching Harry horrified face. I think I'm losing my memory. Big rooster feathers all over my rose, and I don't know how they got there. Dear Tom, I can remember what I did on the night of Halloween. But a cat was attacked and I got paint all down my front. Dear Tom, Percy keeps telling me I'm pale and I'm not myself. I think he suspects me. There was another attack today, and I didn't know where I was. Tom, what am I going to do? I think I'm going mad. I think I'm the one attacking everyone, Tom. Harry's fists went clenched, the nails digging deep into his palms. It looked a very long time for stupid little Ginny to go trust her diary, said Riddle, but she finally became suspicious and tried to dispose of it. And that's where you came in, Harry. You found it, and I couldn't have been more delighted. Of all the people who could have picked it up, it was you. The very person I was almost anxious to meet. And why did you want to meet me? Said Harry. Anger was coursing through him, and it was an effort to keep his voice quiet. Well, you see, Ginny told me all about you, Harry, said Harry. Your whole fantastic, fascinating story. His eyes roved over the light-turning scar on Harry's forehead, and their expressions grew hungrier. I knew I must find out more about you, talk to you, meet you if I could. So I decided to show you my famous capture of the King of Hagrid to gain your trust. Hagrid's my friend, said Harry, his voice now shaking. And you framed him, didn't you? I thought you made a mistake, but Riddle's left, his left, high left again. It was my word against Harry. Well, you can imagine how it looked to an old Armando did. On the one hand, Tom Riddle was a brilliant, parentless but so brave school professional student. On the other hand, the blundering Hagrid in trouble every other week, trying to raise werewolf cubs under his back, sneaking up to forbidden forests to rescue trolls. But I did it. Even I was surprised how to tell the plan worked. I thought someone must realize that Harry couldn't possibly be the heir of Slytherin. I had taken me 5 whole years to find out everything I could about the Chamber of Secrets and discover the secret entrance, as though Hagrid had the brain or the power. Only the big Transfiguration teacher, Dumbledore, seemed to think Hagrid was innocent. He persuaded Dickon to keep Hagrid and train him as gamekeeper. Well, yes, I think Dumbledore might have guessed. Dumbledore never seemed to like me as much as the other teachers did. I bet Dumbledore saw right through you, Harry said. His teeth gritted. Well, he certainly kept me a knowing close watch on me after Hagrid failed, said Riddle carelessly. I knew it wouldn't be safe to open the chamber again while I was still asleep. But I wasn't going to waste those long years I spent searching for it. I decided to live beyond the diary, preserving my 16 years old self in its future, so that one day with luck I would be able to laugh in others in my footsteps and finish Soldier Slytherin's noble work. Well, you haven't finished it, said Harry, trained badly. No one died this time, not even a cat. In a few hours, the magic draught will be ready, and everyone who was petrified will be right again. Haven't I already told you? Said Riddle quietly. But healing Moblin doesn't matter to me anymore. For many months now, my biggest target has been you. Harry stared at him. Imagine how angry I was when the next time my diary was opened. It was Ginny who was writing to me, not you. She saw you with the diary, you see, and panicked. What if you found out how it worked, and I repeated all her secrets to you? What if, even worse, I told you who'd been strangling roosters? So the foolish little brat waited until your dormitory was deserted to store it. Now I knew what I knew. It was clear to me that you were on the trail of Slytherin. For everything Ginny had told me about you, I knew you would go to any length to solve the mystery, particularly if one of your best friends was a captain. And Ginny had told me the whole school was buzzing because you could speak puzzles. So I made Ginny write her own farewell on the wall and commanded you to read. She struggled and cried and became very boring. But there isn't much life left now. She put so much into it. Enough to let me leave its page at last. I have been waiting for you to appear since we arrived here. I knew you'd come. I have many questions for you, Harry Potter. Like what? Harry spat, fist still clenched. Well, said Riddle, smiling pleasantly. How is that you, a skinny boy with no extraordinary magic talent, managed to be fit the greatest wizard of all time? How did you escape with nothing but a scar where Voldemort's power was destroyed? There was an odd red gleam in his hungry eyes now. Why do you care how I escaped? Said very slowly. Voldemort was after your time. Voldemort, said Riddle softly, is my past, present, and future, Harry Potter. He pulled Harry's wand from his pocket and began to trace it through the air, writing 3 shimmering words, Tom Marlborough Riddle. And he waved the wand once, and the letter of his name rearranged themselves. I am Lord Voldemort. You see, he whispered. It was a name I was already using at Hogwarts, to my most intimate friends only, of course. You'd think I was going to use my filthy muggle father's name forever. I, in whose veins ran the blood of Salazar Slytherin himself, through my mother's side. I kept the name of a foul kind muggle who abandoned me even before I was born, just because he found it out his wife was a witch. No, Harry, I fashioned myself to name my new wizard everywhere would one day fear to speak. When I have become the greatest sorcerer in the world. Harry's brain seemed to have jumped. He stared nobly at Riddle, at the orphan boy who had grown up to murder Harry's own parents, and so many others. At last he forced himself to think. "You're not," he said, his quiet voice full of hatred. "Not what?" "Not the," snapped Riddle. "Not the greatest sorcerer in the world," said Harry, breathing fast. "Sorry to disappoint you, and all that, but the greatest wizard in the world is Albus Dumbledore. Everyone says so. Even when you were strong, you didn't dare try and take over at Hogwarts. Dumbledore saw through you when you were at school, and he still threatens you now, wherever you're hiding these days." The smile had gone from Riddle's face to replaced by an ugly look. "Dumbledore, been driven out of his castle by the moment's memory of me," he hissed. "He's not as gone as you might think," Harry retorted. He was speaking at random, wanting to scare Riddle, teasing rather than believing it to be true. Riddle opened his mouth but froze. Music was coming from somewhere. Riddle whirled around to stare down the antechamber. The music was growing louder. It was eerie, spine-tingling, unearthly. It left the hair on Harry's scalp and made his hair feel as though it was swelling to twice its normal size. Then, as the music reached such a pitch that Harry felt it vibrating inside his own ribs, flames erupted at the top of the nearest pillar. A common bird the size of a swan had appeared, peeping its weird music to the vault's ceiling. It had a glittering golden tail as long as a peacock's, and gleaming gold talons, which were gripping a large bundle. A second later, the bird was flying straight at Harry. It dropped the ragged thing it was carrying at his feet, then landed heavily on his shoulder. As it folded its great wings, Harry looked up and saw it had long, sharp golden beak and a beetly black eye. The bird stopped singing. It sat still and warm next to Harry's cheek, gazing steadily at Riddle. "That's a phoenix," said Riddle, staring sweetly back at Fox. Harry breathed, and he felt the bird's golden claws squeeze his shoulder gently. "And that," said Harry. Riddle, the rat thing what Fox had dropped. "That's the old school sorting hat." So it was, patched, frayed, and dirty. The hat lay motionless at Harry's feet. Riddle began to laugh again. He laughed so hard that the dirt chamber rang with it, as though 10 Riddles were laughing at once. "This is what Dumbledore sent his defender, a songbird in the old hat. Do you feel brave, Harry Potter? Do you feel safe now?" Harry didn't answer. He might not see what use Fox or the sorting hat were, but he was no longer alone, and he waited for a little to stop laughing with his courage mounting. To business, Harry, said Riddle, still smiling broadly. Twice in your past and my future we have met, and twice I failed to kill you. How did you survive? Tell me everything. The longer you talk, he added softly, the longer you stay alive. Harry was thinking fast, weighing his chance. Riddle had the one. Harry, had thoughts and sorting out, neither of which would be much good in the duel. It looked bad, all right, but the longer Ginny stood there, the more life was dwindling out of Ginny. And in the meantime, Harry noticed suddenly Riddle's outline has been coming clear, more solid. If it had to be a fight between him and Riddle, better soon than later. No one knows why you lost your powers when you attacked me, said Harry abruptly. I don't know myself, but I know why you couldn't kill me. Because my mother died to save me. My common, Murgle-born mother, he added, shaking with suppressed rage. She stopped you killing me, and I've seen the real you. I saw you last year. You're wrecked. You're barely alive. That's where all your power got you. You're in hiding. You ugly, you fool. Riddle's face conjured ran his force into an awful smile. So your mother died to save you? Yeah, that's a powerful kind of chump. I can see now. There is nothing special about you after all. I wonder, you see, because there are strange likenesses between us, Harry Potter. Even you must have noticed both of us are both half-bloods, orphans raised by muggles, probably the only two puzzle-mouths to come to Hogwarts since the Grey Slytherin himself. We even looked something alike. But after all, it was merely a lucky chance that saved you from me. That's all I wanted to know. Harry stood, tense, waiting for Riddle to raise his hand once. But Riddle's twisted mouth was whining again. Now, Harry, I'm going to teach you a little lesson. Let's match the power of Lord Voldemort, hero Slytherin, against famous Harry Potter, and the best weapon Dumbledore can give him. He cast an amused eye over Fox and the Sorting Hat, then walked away. Harry feared, spreading up his nimble legs, watched Riddle stop between the high pillars and looked up into the stone-faced Slytherin, high above him in the darkness. Riddle opened his mouth wide and hissed, but Harry understood what he was saying. Speak to me, Slytherin, greatest of Hogwarts 4. Harry wheeled around to look at the sea, too, Fox swine on his shoulder. Slytherin's gigantic stone face was moving. Horror-struck, Harry saw his mouth opening wider and wider, make a huge black hole, and something was stirring inside his statue's mouth. Something was slithering up from his back. Harry backed away until he hit the dark chamber wall, and as he fought, Harry wanted to shout, "Don't leave me!" But what chance did a phoenix have against the King of Serpents? Did a phoenix have against the King of Serpents? Something huge hit the floor of the chamber. Harry felt it shudder. He think he knew what was happening. He could sense it, could almost see the gigantic serpent uncoiling itself from Slytherin's mouth. Then he heard Riddle's hissing voice. Kill him. The basilisk was moving toward Harry. He couldn't hear its heavy body slithering heavily across the dusty floor. Eyes still tightly shut, Harry began to run violently sideways, his hand outstretched, feeling his way. Voldemort was laughing. Harry tripped. He fell hard onto the stone and tasted blood. The serpent was barely bit from him. He could hear it coming. That was a loud, explosive, speeding sound right above him, and then something heavy hit Harry so hard that he was smashed into a wall. Waiting for fangs to sink through his body, he heard more mad hissing, something crashing wildly off the pillars. He couldn't help it. He opened his eyes wide enough to squint at what was going on. The enormous serpent, bright poisonous green, thick as an ash trunk, had raised itself high in the air, and its great blunt head was waving drunkenly between the pillars. As Harry trembled readily to close his eyes if it turned, he saw what had distanced the snake. Fawkes was soaring around its head, and the basilisk was stabbing furiously at him with fangs long and thin as sabers. Fawkes dived. His long golden back sank out of the side, and a sudden shower of dark blood splattered the floor. The snake's tail thrashed, narrowly missing Harry, and before Harry could shut his eyes, it turned. Harry looked straight into its face and saw its eyes. Both its great bulbous yellow eyes had been punctured by the phoenix. Blood was streaming to the floor, and the snake was spitting in agony. "No!" Harry heard Riddle screaming. "Leave the bud! Leave the bud! The boy is behind you! You can still smell him! Kill him!" The blinded serpent awaited, completely still deadly. Fawkes was circling its head, peeping its airy song, jabbing here and there as its scales nose, as the blood poured from its ringed eyes. "Help me! Help me!" Harry murmured wildly. "Someone! Anyone!" The snake's tail whipped across the floor again. Harry ducked. Something soft hit his face. The basilisk had swapping the sorting hat to Harry's arm. Harry seized it. It was all he had left, his only chance. He rammed into his head and threw himself flat on the floor as the basilisk's tail swung over him again. Help me, Harry thought. His eyes screwed tight under the hat. "Please help me." There was no answering voice. Instead, they had contact, as though an invisible hand was squeezing it very tightly. Something very hard and heavy thudded onto the top of Harry's head, almost knocking him out. Stars swinging in front of his eyes, he grabbed the top of the hat and pulled it off, and felt something long and hard beneath it. A gleaming silver sword had appeared inside the hat, its handle glittering with rubies the size of flags. "Kill the boy! Leave the bad! The boy is behind you! Snape, smell him!" Harry was on his feet, ready. The basilisk's head was falling, its body coiling around, hitting pillars as it twisted to face him. He could see the best, bloody eye sockets. He see the mouth stretching wide enough to swallow him whole, lined with fangs long as his sword, thin, glittering, but enormous. It slung blindly. Harry dodged and it hit the chamber's wall. It lunged again, and its forked tongue lashed Harry's side. He raised the sword in both his hands. The basilisk lunged again, and this time its aim was true. Harry knew his whole weight behind the sword had dropped into the roof of the serpent's mouth. But a warm blood drenched Harry's arms. He felt a searing pain just above his elbow. One long poisonous fang was sinking deeper and deeper into his arm, and it splintered as the basilisk kneeled over Harry, over sideways and fell, twitching to the floor. Harry slid down the wall. He gripped the fang that was spread in poison through his body and wrenched it out of his arm. But he knew it was too late. White-hot pain was spreading slowly and steadily from the wound. Even as he dropped the fang and watched his own blood soaking his robes, his vision went foggy. The chamber was dissolved in a real and dull color. A patch of scarlet scanned past, and Harry heard a soft chatter of clothes behind him. "Fox," said Harry thickly. "You're fantastic, Fox." He felt the bird lace its beautiful head on the spot where the serpent's fang had pierced him. He could hear echoing footsteps, and then a dark shadow moved in front of him. "You're dead, Harry Potter," said Riddle's voice above him. "Dead. Even Dumbledore's birds know it. Do you see what he's doing, Potter? He's crying." Harry blinked. Fox had slid at the focus. Thick pearly tears were trickling down the glossy feathers. "I'm going to sit here and watch you die, Harry Potter. Take time. I'm in no hurry." Harry felt drowsily. Everything around him seemed to be spinning. "So and the famous Harry Potter," said Riddle's distant voice. Alone in the Chamber of Secrets, forescans by his friends, defeated at last by the Dark Lord he so unwisely challenged. "You'll be back with your dear Mudblood mother's son soon, Harry. She brought you 12 years from borrowed time, but Lord Voldemort got you in the end, as you know he must." "If this is dying," thought Harry, "it's not bad." Even the pain was leaving him. But was this dying? Instead of going black, the chamber seemed to coming back into focus. Harry gave his head a little shake, and there was Fox, still resting his head on Harry's arm. A pearly patch of tear was shining all around the wand, except that there was no wand. "Get away, bird!" said Riddle's voice suddenly. "Get away from him! I said get away!" Harry raised his head. Riddle was pointing Harry's wand at Fox. There was a bang like a gun, and Fox took flight again in a whirl of gold and scarlet. "Phoenix tears," said Riddle quietly, staring at Harry's arm. "Of course, healing powers, I forgot." He looked into Harry's face. "But it makes no difference. In fact, I prefer in this way. Just you and me, Harry Potter. You and me." Harry raised the wand. Then, in a rush of wings, Fox had soared back overhead, and something fell into Harry's lap. The diary. For a split second, both Harry and Riddle was wand still raised, stared at it. Then, without thinking, without considering, as though he had meant to do this all along, Harry seized the basilisk fan from the floor next to him and plunged it straight into the heart of the book. There was long, dreadful, piercing scream. Ink splattered out of the diary in torrents, screaming over Harry's hands, flooding the floor. Riddle was flirting and twisting, screaming and failing, and then he had gone. Harry's wand fell to the floor with a chatter, and there was silence. Silence except for the steady drip of ink still oozing from the diary. The basilisk venom had burned a sizzling hot right through it. Shaking all over, Harry pulled himself up. His head was spinning, as though his just traveled miles by flew feathers. Slowly he gathered through his wand and the sorting hat, and with a huge tug, retrieved the glistening sword from the sheath of the basilisk's mouth. Then came a faint moan from the end of the chamber. Ginny was staring. As Harry hurried toward her, she sat up. She bemused eyes traveled from the lurch of the dead basilisk over Harry in the blood-soaked brows, then to the diary in his hand. Harry drew a great shuddering gasp, and tears began to pour down her face. Harry, oh Harry, I tried to tell you at breakfast, but I couldn't say it in front of Percy. It was me, Harry, but I swear I didn't mean to. Riddle made me. He took me over. And how did you kill the thing? Where's Riddle? That last thing I remember is him coming out from the diary. It's all right, said Harry, holding up the diary and showing Ginny the fang-hole. Riddle's finished. Look, him and the basilisk. Come on, Ginny. Let's get out of here. I'm going to be expelled, Ginny wept as Harry helped her awkwardly from her feet. I've looked forward to come at Hogwarts ever since Bill came, and now I have to leave. What will Mom and Dad say? Fox was waiting for them, hovering in the chamber entrance. Harry urged Ginny forward. They stepped off the motionless coals and the dead basilisk, through the echoing gloom, and back into the tunnel. Harry heard the stone doors close behind them with a soft hiss. After a few moments' progress up the dark tunnel, a distant sound of slowly shifting rock reached Harry's ears. Run! Harry yelled, speeding up. Ginny's okay! I've got her! He heard Ron give a strangled cheer, and they turned the next bend to see his eager face staring through the sizable gap he had managed to make it the rockfall. Ginny! Ron thrust an arm through the gap in the rock to pull her through burst. You alive! I don't believe it! What happened? Where did the bird come from? Fox was swooped through the gap after Ginny. His Dumbledore, said Harry, squeezing through himself. How come you got the sword? Said Harry, gaping at the glittering weapon in Harry's hand. I'll explain when we get out of here, said Harry, with a side-wide glance at Ginny, who was crying harder than ever. But later, Harry said shortly, we didn't think it was a good idea to tell Ron yet, who'd been opening the chamber, not in front of Ginny anyway. What's Lockhart? Back there, said Ron, still looking puzzled by jerked his head up the tunnel toward the pipe. He's in a bad way. Come and see, led by Fox, whose white scarlet wings emitted a soft golden glow in the darkness. They walked all the way back to the mouth of the pipe. Gilderoy Lockhart was sitting there, humming placidly to himself. His memory's gone, said Ron. The memory charm backfired. Hidden instead of us. Hasn't got a clue who he is, or where he is, or who we are. I told him to come and wait here, his danger to himself. Lockhart peered good-natured up at them all. Hello, he said. Odd sort of place, isn't it? Do you live here? No, said Ron, raising his eyebrow at Harry. Harry bent down and looked up the long dark pipe. Have you thought how we're going to get back up this? He said to Ron. Ron shook his head, but Fawkes the Phoenix had swooped past Harry and now flattening in front of him. His brightly eyes bright into the dark. He was waving his long golden tail feathers. Harry looked uncertain at him. He looks like he wants to grab hold, said Ron, looking perfectly. But you're much too heavy for a bird to pull up there. Fox, said Harry, isn't an ordinary bird. He turned quickly to others. We've got to hold on to each other. Ginny grabbed Ron's head. Professor Lockhart, he means you, said Ron sharply to Lockhart. You hold Ginny's other hand. Harry tucked the sword and the sorting hat into the belt. Ron took hold of the back of Harry's robe, and Harry reached out and took hold of Fox's strangely hot tail feathers. An extraordinary lightness seemed to spread through his whole body, and then a second in a rush of wing, they were flying upward through the top. Harry could hear Lockhart dangling below him, saying, Amazing! Amazing! This is just like magic! The chill air was whipping through Harry's hair, and before he stopped enjoying the ride, it was over. All four of them were hitting the wet floor of Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, and as Lockhart straightened his head, the sink had tied the pipe was sliding back into the place. Myrtle goggled at them. You alive, she said blankly to Harry. There's no need to sound so disappointed, he said grimly, wiping flecks of blood and slime off his scalp. Oh, well, I've just been thinking if you had died, you'd have to. You have been welcome to share my toilet, said Myrtle, blushing silver. Ugh, said Ron, as they left the bathroom from the dark, deserted corridor outside. Harry, I think Myrtle's grown fond of you. You've got competition, Ginny. But tears were still flooding silently down Ginny's face. Where now? Said Ron, with an anxious look at Ginny. Harry pointed. Fox was leading the way, glowing gold along the corridor. They strode after him, and moments later, found themselves outside Professor McGonagall's office. Harry knocked and pushed the door open. Chapter 17. The Heir of Slytherin done.